So there I was at this fancy private school, the kind where all the richest kids in town strutted around like they owned the place. Honestly, I wasn't any different. I was spoiled, privileged, and completely clueless about how the real world worked. My classmates were all about my family's money, and I soaked up the attention like a sponge. Being the son of a big-shot businessman definitely had its perks. I was the textbook definition of a rich kid, confident, maybe a little arrogant, and never really questioned anything. Now, the school had this cleaning lady, Isabella. She was a young woman, quiet, and always working hard. She needed the job to get by. She hadn't been there long, and like most of the staff, the students barely even noticed her as they walked past every day. Isabella didn't talk much about her life, but you could tell she'd been through some stuff. Still, she kept her head down, worked hard, and carried herself with this quiet dignity. To me, Isabella was just part of the scenery, you know? I hardly ever paid her any mind, except maybe when I felt like tossing out a mean comment. Like one time in the hallway, I saw her struggling to carry a big stack of books while she was trying to clean. She tripped a little, and a bunch of books fell on the floor with a loud thump. Everyone turned to look, including me. I walked over with this stupid smirk on my face and looked down at her. "Nice going, Isabella," I said, all sarcastic. "Maybe you should learn to balance things better. You know, folks like you gotta be extra careful. This isn't exactly a place where you can afford to screw up." A few of my buddies laughed, eating up the whole embarrassing scene. Isabella's face went red, but she didn't say anything. She just knelt down to pick up the books, her hands shaking a bit. I kept going, feeling like I was on top of the world. "Maybe you should just stick to cleaning floors," I said. "That's probably the only thing you're good at." The other kids laughed even harder, and Isabella just bit her lip, looking down at the ground. She didn't fight back. She just grabbed the books and went back to work, quiet as could be. For me, it was just another moment to show everyone who was boss, nothing more. But for Isabella, I think it was a painful reminder of how different we were, not just with money, but how people saw her. A few days went by, and I completely forgot about the whole thing, like I did with most things that didn't directly affect me. I just kept living my life, not even thinking about how my words might have hurt someone. To me, Isabella was just another face in the crowd, a school employee I never really gave a second thought to. But then, the day came that changed everything. One afternoon, school let out and everyone was flooding out of the building, and my dad showed up to pick me up, which was weird. Usually, it was the driver or someone from the house, but this time it was Dad himself. Okay, that's the first section. Let me know what you think, and send me the next part when you're ready. I'm especially trying to capture that simple American man voice and be AI-friendly with the language. So, school's out, and I'm heading toward the gate when I see my dad standing by the car, waiting for me, which was pretty rare. But then I noticed something even weirder. Isabella, the cleaning lady, was working near the gate, and she just stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes were wide as saucers, like she'd seen a ghost. She was staring right at my dad, and I could see this mix of confusion and recognition on her face. And then my dad spotted Isabella too. For a second, he looked totally shocked, but then that turned into something else, like a mix of shock and sadness. He took a few steps toward her, and I could barely hear him say, "Isabella, is that really you?" I was standing right between them, and I could feel this weird tension in the air. "Wait a minute, you know her?" I asked, totally confused. My dad didn't answer me right away. He just stood there, staring at Isabella, who looked just as stunned as he did. Isabella finally nodded slowly, her voice all shaky. I didn't know. I didn't realize. It's been so long." My dad took another step closer, his face full of emotion. "I've been looking for you for years," he said, real soft. "I promised your father I would take care of you, but you disappeared. I tried everything to find you. It was like time just froze right there. I was still trying to wrap my head around all this." I looked from my dad to Isabella, who was getting all choked up. What the heck was going on? Why was my dad talking like Isabella was some big deal, not just some cleaning lady? Then the pieces started to fall into place, and my dad told me this story I'd never heard before. Turns out years ago, my dad had been business partners with this guy named Richard Green, a real smart guy who helped build our family's fortune. They were like brothers, working side by side to build the whole empire we had. But then tragedy hit. Richard died in an accident, leaving behind a daughter, Isabella. My dad promised Richard on his deathbed that he'd look after Isabella, make sure she was taken care of. But after Richard died, Isabella just vanished. She left home without telling anyone. She didn't even know that her dad had become a millionaire and was planning to surprise her with a new life. She had no idea her dad had set her up, and in all the confusion after his death, she ended up struggling to survive on her own. "I searched for you," my dad said, his voice all thick. "I searched everywhere, but I couldn't find you. I only had one old picture of you, but I'm so glad I recognized you. I never gave up hope, but I feared the worst. And now, here you are, working at this school. I can't believe it." I just stood there, totally speechless, my mind spinning. How's that sounding? Ready for the next part? So here's the kicker. The girl I'd been putting down, the one I treated like she was nothing, was the daughter of my dad's best friend, the guy who helped build our whole business. And not only that, she was supposed to inherit a big chunk of the money I always thought was going to be mine. Isabella finally spoke up, her voice all shaky. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know what happened to my father. I thought he had nothing left. I had no idea that he had become successful. I didn't know you were looking for me." My dad shook his head, looking like he felt awful. "I failed you, Isabella," he said. "I should have found you sooner. But now that you're here, we can make things right." The reality of the situation just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd spent weeks making fun of a girl who, honestly, deserved the life I had more than I ever did. I treated her like she was beneath me, when really, she was the rightful heir to a fortune bigger than anything I could imagine. My dad turned to me then, his face all serious. "Ethan Caldwell," he said quietly, "Isabella is entitled to a significant portion of the wealth we've built. It's what her father wanted for her. She's as much a part of this family's legacy as you are." My stomach just twisted with guilt and shame. I'd been so cocky, so cruel, and now I was facing the consequences of my actions. Isabella wasn't just a maid. She was someone who deserved a place in the world I'd always taken for granted. And now she was about to inherit a fortune that was way bigger than anything I'd ever dreamed of. But what happened next is something I'll never forget. Isabella, even after everything that had come out, didn't get angry or bitter. She didn't demand revenge for the way I'd treated her. Instead, she looked at me with this kindness, this understanding in her eyes. "I know why you treated me the way you did," she said softly. "You didn't know who I was, and you didn't know my story. But now you do. And I hope you can learn from this, that you can see that people are more than what they seem on the surface." I was so overwhelmed with guilt, I couldn't even say anything. All I could do was nod, humbled by her grace. "I've learned a lot from my experiences," Isabella went on. "Life has a way of teaching us things we never expect. But the most important thing I've learned is that we all deserve to be treated with respect, no matter where we come from or what we look like. Wealth doesn't make someone better than anyone else." Her words just hit me hard. I'd been living in this bubble of privilege, thinking my money and status made me better than everyone else. But now, standing there in front of Isabella, I realized how wrong I'd been. Even my dad was really moved by Isabella's humility and wisdom. He put a hand on her shoulder, his voice full of gratitude. "You've shown us all something important today, Isabella. You've reminded us of the value of," ready for the next bit? "Kindness, empathy, and understanding." From that day on, Isabella wasn't just some employee at the school anymore. She became part of our family, the family she'd been separated from for so long. And me, I felt like dirt after realizing how I'd acted. So I made a real effort to change. I started treating Isabella with the respect she deserved, not because she was now rich, but because I'd finally learned the lesson she'd been kind enough to teach me. And Isabella, she took to her new life with grace and humility, never forgetting where she came from or the hard times she'd been through. She became a symbol of strength and compassion, not just to me, but to everyone who knew her. As the days went by, I just couldn't shake the guilt about how I treated Isabella. I couldn't get away from the shame of realizing how awful I'd been. What I used to think was just harmless teasing now felt like pure venom. I kept replaying those moments in my head, the snide comments, the arrogant looks, and each memory just made the burden I was carrying even heavier. But Isabella, even though she had every reason to be angry, just kept being herself. She was kind, always polite, and never made me feel worse about what had happened between us. It was that quiet strength that bothered me even more. She could have demanded payback, could have loved having the upper hand, but instead she chose to be understanding. The difference between her and my own spoiled behavior just ate at me. One night, I was sitting in my room, just thinking, and I made a decision. I had to talk to Isabella, not just to apologize, even though that was way overdue, but to really understand her better. It wasn't enough to just know I'd messed up. I needed to learn from it. I needed to face my own ignorance. The next morning, I found Isabella in the school courtyard, taking care of some plants. She'd started gardening as a way to clear her head, and she looked peaceful, gently touching the leaves of the plants. "Isabella," I said, my voice all shaky and unsure. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Ethan Caldwell," she said, with a small smile. "How are you?" I scratched the back of my neck, feeling awkward. I wanted to talk to you. Do you have a minute?" Isabella straightened up and nodded. "Of course." We walked over to a bench and sat down, not saying anything for a few minutes. I was trying to find the right words, but it was harder than I thought. Finally, I spoke, my voice heavy with guilt. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about the way I treated you, and I want to say I'm sorry," I started, my words coming out shaky. "I was awful to you, and I had no right to say the things I said. I didn't know who you were, but that's no excuse. It doesn't matter who you are. No one deserves to be treated like that." Isabella listened quietly, her eyes soft but serious. I kept going, the words just spilling out now. Ready for the final stretch? "I've been living in this bubble my whole life," I started. "I never had to think about what it's like for someone who doesn't have what I have. I just assumed. I assumed things about you because of how you looked and the job you had, and that's so messed up. I don't even know how to begin making it right." Isabella stayed quiet for a moment, letting my apology sink in. Then she spoke, her voice calm and understanding. "I appreciate your apology, Ethan Caldwell. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. But more than that, it's important to understand why it happened in the first place. You're right, it shouldn't matter who I am or what my background is. We should treat everyone with respect, no matter their story. But it's not just you. A lot of people make assumptions based on appearances. It's something I've dealt with my whole life." I looked down at my hands, feeling ashamed. "I never thought about it like that," I admitted. Isabella smiled gently. "That's because you haven't had to. People like me, we're constantly aware of how the world sees us. It's something you learn to navigate, but it's not easy. And when people like you, people who have influence, power, choose to use that power to put others down, it has real consequences." My heart just sank. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just didn't think. "I know," Isabella said kindly. "But now you do, and that's what matters." I felt this wave of gratitude wash over me. Isabella wasn't just forgiving me. She was giving me the chance to grow, to become better. It was a gift I hadn't expected, and it humbled me even more. As we talked, I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't before. I told her about the pressure I felt to live up to my family's expectations, about how wealth had kept me from understanding other people's struggles. Isabella, in turn, shared more about her life, about losing her father, about the pain of growing up without knowing where she belonged. The more we talked, the more I realized how much we had in common, even with the huge differences in our lives. We'd both been shaped by what we'd been through, but while I'd been protected by being rich, Isabella had been made stronger by the hard times she'd faced. Over the next few weeks, I really tried to change. I started helping out with the school's programs to help kids from tougher backgrounds. I began to see the world differently, not just through money and status. My friends noticed the change in me, and some of them teased me about it, but I didn't care. I was starting to get what it meant to be part of something bigger than myself. Isabella, meanwhile, had become way more than just someone who worked at the school. She'd been welcomed into my family. And even though it was still a little awkward at times, my dad had taken her under his wing, treating her like the daughter he'd promised to protect all those years ago. All right, that's the whole thing. Let me know what you think of the overall result. I'm ready for feedback or any other tasks you have for me. Isabella had started to explore all the opportunities that came with her inheritance, but she did it with the same down-to-earth attitude she'd always had. She didn't flash her money around or use it to act better than anyone else. Instead, she used it to give back, to support the things she cared about. One night, my dad threw a big party at our place to celebrate Isabella being back in the family. It was a huge deal, with all the important people we knew invited. I'd never really liked those kinds of parties, so I found myself standing on the side, watching Isabella work the room. But what really got me wasn't that she was now part of this world. It was how she carried herself. Isabella was friendly, warm, and welcoming to everyone, no matter who they were or how much money they had. She treated the staff with the same kindness as she did the guests, never letting her new position change who she was. As I watched her, I felt proud not of myself, but of Isabella. She'd been through so much, and yet she wasn't changed by all the money and status. She was the kind of person I wanted to be, someone who saw the good in others, no matter what. Later that night, after most people had left, I found Isabella sitting alone in the garden, looking up at the stars. I went over and sat down next to her, quiet. "You've come a long way," Isabella said, breaking the silence. "I can see the change in you." I smiled, but I still felt a little unsure. "I'm trying, but I still have a lot to learn." Isabella nodded. "We all do." We sat there for a while, just thinking about everything that had happened. Finally, I spoke again. "Isabella, I just want to say thank you. Not just for forgiving me, but for teaching me. You've changed the way I see the world." Isabella turned to me, her expression soft. "You've changed too, Ethan Caldwell, and that's all that matters." As we sat there under the stars, I realized that this was the real wealth in life, not the money, not the status, but the connections we make with others. Isabella had taught me that, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly rich. In the end, it wasn't about the inheritance or the money. It was about the lessons we learned, how we grew as people, and the bonds we formed. And for me, the greatest gift I got wasn't the fortune I'd taken for granted. It was the chance to become a better person and be part of a family that valued kindness, empathy, and love above everything else. As time went on, Isabella became a permanent part of our lives, not just as someone who'd inherited money, but as a real member of our family. She and my dad worked together to honor her father, investing in projects to help people who didn't have much. And me, I used my position to speak up about social issues and push for change.